A chance encounter. The airport terminal was alive with movement and noise as travelers hurried to catch their flights. Families reunited with embraces, and announcements echoed overhead. Sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows, casting golden hues across the polished floors. Amid this bustling scene, Robert Henderson stood still, feeling like a single unmoving piece in a chaotic puzzle. His hands were stuffed deep into the pockets of his old, worn-out coat, his face lined with years of hardship and disappointment. Robert was not just another traveler. At 52, life had dealt him a harsh hand. A recent divorce had left him adrift, and a layoff from his construction job compounded his financial and emotional despair. As he waited for his boarding call, he couldn't help but feel invisible, a ghost drifting through the sea of vibrant, purposeful lives around him. He let out a heavy sigh, shifting uncomfortably as the straps of his weathered duffel bag dug into his shoulder. His flight, 542 to Atlanta, wasn't set to board for another hour, giving him too much time to think about the life he was leaving behind and the uncertain one awaiting him. As he adjusted his bag, his eyes fell upon a young girl standing a few feet away. She couldn't have been older than 12 or 13, her dark skin glowing in the sunlight that caught the tight coils of her hair. She clutched a bright pink backpack with one hand and nervously checked her watch with the other, her large brown eyes scanning the crowd. She was alone. Robert frowned. The sight of a child traveling alone was unusual, and he couldn't help but feel a pang of concern. Her face was a mixture of excitement and apprehension, the kind of expression only youth could hold. She shifted on her feet, her sneakers squeaking faintly against the floor. Despite her nervous energy, there was something about her that radiated resilience, a quiet strength that seemed to defy her age. Unable to shake the feeling, Robert approached her cautiously, clearing his throat to announce his presence. "Hey there," he said gently, trying to muster a friendly smile. "You okay? You waiting for someone?" The girl looked up, startled at first, but her expression quickly softened. "Oh, hi," she said, her voice clear but tinged with shyness. "I'm waiting for my flight. I'm going to visit my dad." Her words were simple, but Robert noticed the way her voice wavered ever so slightly when she mentioned her father. "First time flying alone?" he asked, leaning against the nearby wall to ease the tension in his shoulders. She nodded, her lips curling into a small smile. "Yeah, I'm a little nervous, but I'm also excited. I haven't seen my dad in a long time." Robert felt a pang in his chest, a mixture of sympathy and something else. Nostalgia, maybe. He remembered being young and filled with anticipation for what the world might hold, before life's responsibilities had dulled that sense of wonder. "Well," he said, gesturing to her backpack, "it looks like you came prepared. Got any snacks in there for the trip?" Amara giggled, a light, melodic sound that broke through the dull hum of the terminal. "Of course. My mom packed me enough to last a whole week, I think." They shared a brief laugh, and Robert found himself relaxing for the first time in days. There was something about Amara's presence that was grounding, a reminder that not everything in life was grim and gray. He learned her name during their brief exchange, and that she loved to draw, her dream being to one day become a famous graphic designer. As the boarding announcement echoed through the terminal, signaling their flight's imminent departure, Robert glanced at Amara. She was fidgeting again, her earlier nervousness creeping back. "Hey," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "You're going to do great. Just think about all the fun you'll have with your dad." Her smile returned, and she nodded with determination. "Thanks, mister. Just call me Robert," he said, waving off the formality. They boarded together, and Robert was relieved to see that their seats were only a row apart. As he stowed his bag in the overhead compartment, he noticed a man in the aisle seat across from Amara. The man, dressed in a pressed suit and sporting a sharp jawline, scowled as Amara took her seat by the window. Robert didn't think much of it at first, chalking it up to a bad day. But as the man's eyes lingered on Amara with a look of disdain, Robert's stomach tightened. The cabin was bustling as the flight attendants prepared for takeoff. Amara leaned over to look out the window, marveling at the view, her earlier anxiety giving way to excitement. Robert watched her, a protective feeling welling up in him. He didn't know this girl, but he felt an unspoken responsibility to ensure she was safe and comfortable. As the engines roared to life and the plane began taxiing, the man across the aisle muttered something under his breath. Robert couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakably condescending. Amara's smile faltered, and she turned back to her seat, her hands gripping the armrests. "You shouldn't be here alone," the man said loudly, his voice cutting through the hum of the engines. "Kids like you don't belong on flights like this." Robert's blood ran cold. His jaw tightened as he watched Amara shrink into her seat, her earlier confidence evaporating. He turned to the man, his voice calm but firm. "Excuse me, that's a child you're talking about." The man's glare shifted to Robert, his lips curling into a sneer. "And who are you?" "Her babysitter." Robert held his ground, his voice steady. "I'm someone who believes she has every right to be here, same as you." The man scoffed, but before he could respond, a flight attendant appeared, her professional smile faltering as she took in the tension. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her eyes darting between the man and Robert. "No problem," Robert said quickly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Just a misunderstanding." The man grumbled under his breath, but leaned back in his seat, clearly displeased. Robert turned to Amara, offering her a reassuring smile. "Don't let people like him get to you," he whispered. "They're not worth your time." Amara nodded, her eyes wide but grateful. For the rest of the flight, Robert kept a watchful eye on her, determined to shield her from the world's ugliness, even if only for a little while. He didn't know it yet, but this chance encounter would change both their lives forever. Standing tall amidst turbulence, as the plane leveled off into cruising altitude, the steady hum of the engines filled the cabin. The earlier tension between Robert and the man across the aisle hung in the air like a storm cloud, but Robert tried to shake it off. He glanced at Amara, who had shrunk into her seat. Her small hands gripped the edges of her backpack tightly, her gaze fixed on the window as if trying to disappear into the passing clouds. Robert leaned over slightly, his voice low and reassuring. "You doing okay, Amara?" She turned to him, her wide eyes shimmering with unspoken fear. "Why was he so mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't do anything to him." The question hit Robert harder than he expected. He paused, searching for the right words. "Sometimes," he began, "people like that, they don't really see the person in front of them. They see something else, something they've made up in their heads." Amara tilted her head, her young mind grappling with the complexity of his explanation. "But why? Why would someone make up something bad about someone they don't even know?" Robert sighed, feeling the weight of the moment. "Because it's easier for them. It's easier to blame others for their unhappiness than to look at themselves. But that doesn't make it right." Amara nodded slowly, though her expression remained troubled. "Does it happen to you too?" she asked. Robert hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, it does. It's happened a lot in my life. And every time, it feels just as wrong as it did the first time." Her brow furrowed. "What do you do when it happens?" A flicker of pain crossed Robert's face, but he forced himself to meet her gaze. "You stand tall. You don't let their words define you. And if you can, you stand up for others when you see it happening to them. Just like I did for you." Amara's lips curled into a small, brave smile. "Thank you, Robert." Robert gave her a soft nod, his heart warming slightly. Despite the man's words, Amara's courage was already beginning to shine through. As the flight attendants began their rounds, Robert and Amara settled into a rhythm. He offered her his pack of pretzels from the snack cart, and she eagerly accepted, her youthful enthusiasm slowly returning. Robert noticed her pulling out a small sketchbook and a pencil from her backpack. "You draw?" he asked, genuinely intrigued. Amara's face lit up, the earlier sadness temporarily forgotten. "Yeah, I love to draw. I want to be a graphic designer one day. My dad says I'm really good." Robert leaned closer, watching as she flipped through pages filled with drawings. There were sketches of people, animals, and fantastical landscapes, each one vibrant with detail. He was taken aback by her talent. "Amara, these are incredible," he said earnestly. "You've got a real gift." Her cheeks flushed with pride. "Thanks. I've been practicing since I was little. My mom always said I should follow my dreams, no matter what." Robert smiled, but the words stirred something deep within him. He couldn't remember the last time he truly pursued a dream. Life had become a series of compromises, sacrifices, and disappointments. Watching Amara pour her heart into her art made him feel both inspired and a little wistful. "Do you ever draw what you're feeling?" he asked. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Like today. I think I want to draw what it felt like when that man was being mean." Robert's heart sank a little, but he nodded encouragingly. "That's a brave thing to do, Amara. Art can be a powerful way to work through tough feelings." She opened a blank page and began sketching, her pencil moving swiftly across the paper. Robert watched as the image came to life. A small figure surrounded by storm clouds, with a single ray of sunlight breaking through. It was simple, yet profound. "That's amazing," he said softly. "You're turning something hurtful into something beautiful." Amara beamed at his praise, but their quiet moment was interrupted by the man across the aisle. He let out a loud scoff, his eyes narrowing as he noticed her drawing. "Don't make a mess," he muttered, his tone dripping with disdain. Robert's jaw clenched. He turned to the man, his voice firm but calm. "Leave her alone. She's not bothering anyone." The man sneered. "Oh, so you're her protector now." Figures. Always someone looking for an excuse to play hero. Robert felt his anger rise but kept his composure. "You know," he said, his voice steady, "it says a lot about a person when they go out of their way to make a child feel small. You should think about that." The man's face reddened, but he didn't respond. Instead, he turned away, grumbling under his breath. Robert leaned back in his seat, his pulse still racing from the confrontation. He hated that Amara had to witness such ugliness, but he was determined to show her that standing up for what's right was always worth it. The rest of the flight passed in relative peace. Amara continued to draw, occasionally sharing her sketches with Robert, who encouraged her creativity at every turn. They played a game of imagining the wildest, most fantastical destinations their plane could be headed to. Amara's imagination knew no bounds. She described a land where candy grew on trees and dragons guarded castles made of clouds. Robert found himself laughing along, her infectious energy lifting his spirits. But as the plane began its descent, the earlier tension lingered in Robert's mind. He knew the world outside the plane was filled with people like the man across the aisle, people who would judge Amara for nothing more than the color of her skin. It made him ache for her future, for the challenges she would inevitably face. He glanced at her, her small frame still brimming with hope despite everything. "Amara," he said gently, "promise me something." She looked up curious. "What?" "Promise me you'll keep drawing. Keep dreaming. No matter what anyone says, don't let them take that away from you." Amara's face grew serious, and she nodded. "I promise." As the plane touched down, the cabin filled with the sounds of passengers preparing to disembark. Robert helped Amara gather her things, his heart heavy but hopeful. Their chance encounter had been brief, but it had left a profound impact on both of them. As they stepped off the plane and into the bustling terminal, Robert felt a sense of purpose stirring within him. He didn't know what lay ahead for him or for Amara, but he was determined to carry this moment forward, to stand tall in the face of life's turbulence, and to be the kind of person who lifted others up, just as he had tried to do for her. Little did they know, their journey together wasn't over yet. Life had more in store for them, moments that would test their resolve and remind them of the power of connection, courage, and hope. The weight of the world. The airport terminal buzzed with the familiar hum of voices, announcements, and the occasional laughter of reunited loved ones. As the passengers from Flight 542 filtered out, Robert kept a protective eye on Amara, staying close to her side as they made their way through the terminal. Her small frame seemed to shrink under the weight of her pink backpack, but her steps were steady. The earlier confrontation still lingered in Robert's mind, its weight heavier than his own duffel bag. He glanced at Amara, her youthful face a mix of resilience and lingering doubt. The hateful words from the man on the plane had clearly left an impression, but Robert also saw something stronger in her, a determination that reminded him of his younger self before life had worn him down. "Amara," he said gently, slowing his pace to match hers. "How are you holding up?" She looked up at him, her dark eyes searching his face. "I'm okay," she said after a moment, though her voice carried a hint of hesitation. I don't get why some people hate me when they don't even know me." Robert's heart tightened. He wished he could give her an answer that would make everything better, but he knew there wasn't one. "You know," he began, choosing his words carefully, "sometimes people are afraid of things they don't understand. And instead of trying to learn, they act out. It's not fair. And it's not right, but it says more about them than it does about you." Amara nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "But how do I make them understand?" Robert stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "You can't always make people understand, Amara, but what you can do is show them who you are. Be strong, be kind, and don't let their ignorance stop you from being yourself. That's the best way to prove them wrong." She smiled faintly, the corners of her mouth lifting just enough to let him know his words had reached her. "Thanks, Robert. You're kind of like a superhero, you know." Robert chuckled, a sound that felt surprisingly light after the weight of the day. "I don't know about that. I think you're the real hero here." As they approached the baggage claim area, Robert noticed a woman standing near the carousel, her eyes scanning the crowd with a mix of impatience and worry. She was tall, with a poised demeanor and an air of authority. Her tailored blazer and sleek hair suggested she was used to taking charge. Amara spotted her too and waved enthusiastically. "Mom." The woman's face softened immediately, and she hurried over, enveloping Amara in a hug that seemed to melt the tension from her shoulders. "Oh, thank goodness," she said, her voice rich with relief. "I was so worried about you flying alone." "I'm fine, Mom," Amara replied, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. "Robert helped me." Her mother straightened, her sharp eyes landing on Robert. There was a moment of hesitation, a flicker of uncertainty, before she extended her hand. "Thank you for looking out for her," she said, her tone formal but sincere. "I'm Vanessa Johnson." Robert shook her hand, offering a polite smile. "Robert Henderson. It wasn't any trouble. Amara's a great kid." Vanessa's gaze lingered on him, as if trying to assess his character. "Still, I appreciate it. You didn't have to, but you did." Robert shrugged modestly. "I just did what felt right." As Vanessa and Amara collected their luggage, Robert lingered nearby, unsure whether he should simply walk away or say a proper goodbye. He felt a tug in his chest, an odd reluctance to part ways with the girl who had unknowingly reminded him of the best parts of himself. Vanessa seemed to sense his hesitation. "Are you headed somewhere nearby?" she asked, her tone casual but curious. "Just to a hotel," Robert replied. "I'm in between things right now." Vanessa arched an eyebrow, and Robert realized how vague he sounded. "I lost my job recently," he admitted, scratching the back of his neck. "I'm trying to figure out my next steps." There was a pause, and then Vanessa nodded. "Well, if you're not in a rush, maybe you'd like to join us for dinner. Amara's been through a lot today, and it seems like you've been a good friend to her." Robert hesitated, unsure if he should accept, but the hopeful look on Amara's face made the decision for him. "I'd like that," he said, smiling. The restaurant Vanessa chose was a cozy family-owned diner just a few blocks from the airport. The smell of freshly baked bread and sizzling burgers greeted them as they entered, and Amara immediately perked up at the sight of a chalkboard menu featuring milkshakes in every imaginable flavor. They slid into a booth, Amara eagerly flipping through the menu while Vanessa and Robert exchanged polite conversation. Vanessa asked about his life, and Robert found himself opening up more than he expected. He told her about his years working in construction, his failed marriage, and his struggle to find purpose after losing both. Vanessa listened intently, her expression thoughtful. "It sounds like you've been through a lot," she said, "but you seem like someone who doesn't give up easily." Robert smiled faintly. "I try, but it's been hard." Vanessa nodded. "Hard doesn't mean impossible. Sometimes the hardest times are when we find out what we're really capable of." Her words struck a chord with him, and he realized how much he had needed to hear something like that. He glanced at Amara, who was busy doodling on a napkin, her earlier troubles seemingly forgotten. Her resilience inspired him in ways he couldn't quite put into words. As the meal progressed, the atmosphere grew lighter. They laughed over Amara's enthusiastic descriptions of her milkshake flavors and bonded over shared stories of life's unpredictability. For the first time in what felt like forever, Robert felt a sense of belonging. When the check arrived, Vanessa insisted on covering it, despite Robert's protests. "Consider it a thank you for looking out for Amara," she said firmly. Outside the diner, the sun was beginning to set, casting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Vanessa turned to Robert, her expression thoughtful. "You know," she said, "I work in project management for a nonprofit. We're always looking for people who are good with their hands and good with people. If you're interested, I could put in a word for you." Robert blinked, caught off guard by the offer. "That's very kind of you." "It's not kindness," Vanessa replied. "It's recognizing potential." As they exchanged contact information, Amara tugged on Robert's sleeve. "You'll call us, right? You promised." Robert chuckled, ruffling her hair gently. "I promise." As they parted ways, Robert felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. This chance encounter, born out of turbulence and uncertainty, had given him a glimpse of a brighter future. He didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. And maybe, just maybe, he'd found more than a friend in Amara and her mother. He'd found a new beginning. Seeds of change. The evening air outside the diner was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain on the horizon. Robert watched as Vanessa and Amara walked away, their silhouettes illuminated by the golden glow of the streetlights. Amara waved enthusiastically before disappearing around the corner, her cheerful energy still radiating even from a distance. Robert stood there for a moment, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder, the warmth of the evening sinking into his bones. He replayed Vanessa's words in his mind. "It's not kindness. It's recognizing potential." The offer she had made hung in the air, a tantalizing possibility that felt almost too good to be true. For a man who had spent the last several months drowning in uncertainty, it was like being thrown a lifeline. That night, Robert checked into a modest motel just outside the city. The room was small but clean, with a bed that creaked when he sat on it and a lamp that buzzed faintly when turned on. He dropped his bag onto the floor and sat at the edge of the bed, staring at his reflection in the dusty mirror across the room. His face was tired, lined with years of struggle and disappointment. But tonight, there was something different in his eyes, a spark of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. The events of the day played over in his mind, meeting Amara, standing up to the man on the plane, and the unexpected connection with Vanessa. It felt like the universe was nudging him, giving him a chance to rewrite his story. He pulled out the business card Vanessa had handed him at the diner. Her name was printed in clean, bold letters, followed by her title, Director of Operations, Future Horizons Initiative. Beneath it was a tagline that read, "Building Communities, Empowering Lives." Robert traced the edges of the card with his thumb, the weight of its significance settling in. He wanted to call her immediately, to accept her offer and see where it might lead. But doubt crept in, its familiar voice whispering in his ear. What if you're not good enough? What if it doesn't work out? What if you fail again? Robert shook his head, pushing the thoughts away. He couldn't let fear dictate his decisions anymore. He had spent too long running from opportunities, too afraid to believe in his own worth. Tonight, he resolved to take a step forward, even if it was just one small step. The next morning, Robert woke early, the soft light of dawn filtering through the thin motel curtains. He showered, shaved, and dressed in his best shirt and jeans, simple but presentable. He rehearsed what he would say to Vanessa in his head, pacing the room as he built up the courage to make the call. Finally, with a deep breath, he dialed the number on the card. It rang twice before Vanessa's voice came through, warm and professional. "This is Vanessa Johnson." "Hi, Vanessa. It's Robert Henderson," he said, his voice steadier than he expected. "We met yesterday, on the plane, with Amara." "Robert," she exclaimed, her tone instantly brightening. "I was hoping I'd hear from you. How are you?" "I'm doing well, thanks. I wanted to follow up about what you mentioned yesterday, about the opportunity with your organization. I'm interested in learning more, if the offer still stands." Vanessa didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. Why don't you come by the office this afternoon? I'll give you a tour and introduce you to the team." Robert agreed, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nerves. As he hung up the phone, he felt a surge of determination. This was his chance to start fresh, to build something meaningful. He wouldn't let it slip away. The Future Horizons Initiative office was housed in a renovated brick building in the heart of the city. The exterior was adorned with vibrant murals depicting scenes of community and progress, a testament to the organization's mission. Robert stepped inside, immediately greeted by the hum of activity. Staff members typing away at desks, volunteers sorting through donations, and the faint smell of coffee wafting from a break room. Vanessa met him in the lobby, her confident stride and warm smile putting him at ease. "Robert, welcome," she said, shaking his hand firmly. "Let me show you around." As they walked through the office, Vanessa explained the organization's work. They focused on community development, offering job training, mentorship programs, and resources for underprivileged families. Robert was struck by the energy and passion of everyone he met. It was clear they believed deeply in what they were doing. "We've been expanding our vocational training programs," Vanessa explained as they entered a large workshop area, filled with tools and equipment. "This is where we teach people hands-on skills. Carpentry, plumbing, electrical work. It's all about giving them the tools to rebuild their lives." Robert ran his fingers over the edge of a workbench, the familiar feel of wood and tools stirring something within him. "I used to do carpentry," he said, almost to himself, "before everything fell apart." Vanessa's eyes lit up. "Then you'd be perfect for this. We're looking for someone to help run the program. Teaching, mentoring, being a role model for the trainees. What do you think?" Robert hesitated, the weight of the offer sinking in. He thought about his years of experience, the projects he had built, and the satisfaction of creating something with his own two hands. He thought about the mistakes he had made, the regrets that had piled up like debris. But most of all, he thought about Amara, her courage, her resilience, and her unwavering belief in herself. "I think I'd like to give it a shot," he said finally, his voice steady with conviction. Vanessa smiled. "I think you'll do great." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Robert threw himself into the work, rediscovering the joy of building and teaching. He found himself connecting with the trainees, many of whom came from backgrounds of struggle and adversity. Their stories resonated with him, and he made it his mission to guide them with patience and understanding. Amara and Vanessa became a constant presence in his life. Amara often stopped by the workshop after school, her sketchbook always in hand. She filled the room with her infectious laughter and endless creativity, reminding Robert of the power of hope and imagination. Vanessa, ever the steady force, offered him guidance and encouragement, pushing him to believe in his own potential. One evening, as they sat together in the workshop, Amara showed Robert a new drawing she had been working on. It was a portrait of him, standing tall amidst a backdrop of clouds and sunlight. Beneath it, she had written in bold letters, "Every hero starts with a step." Robert's throat tightened as he looked at the drawing. He realized how far he had come, how much he had grown since that fateful flight. He wasn't the same man who had boarded the plane, weighed down by his past. He was rebuilding, not just his life, but himself. For the first time in years, Robert felt truly alive. And as he looked at Amara and Vanessa, he knew he wasn't alone. Together, they had found something extraordinary. The strength to face life's challenges, the courage to seize new opportunities, and the power to inspire one another. This wasn't just a new chapter for Robert. It was the beginning of a story he had never imagined for himself. A story of resilience, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds forged in the most unexpected of places. Building a legacy. The workshop hummed with activity, the air filled with the rhythmic sounds of saws buzzing, hammers striking nails, and voices exchanging advice. Sunlight poured in through the large windows, casting a golden glow on the rows of workbenches scattered with tools and unfinished projects. Robert stood at the center of it all, his hands guiding a young trainee on how to sand down the edges of a wooden cabinet. "That's it," Robert said, his voice patient and encouraging. "Go with the grain of the wood. Let the tool do the work. It's all about control, not force." The trainee, a lanky teenager named Marcus, nodded and focused on his task, his movements becoming smoother with each pass. Robert stepped back, watching with a sense of pride that was new and deeply satisfying. For the first time in years, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself, a community with purpose and heart. As the day wore on, the trainees began to clean up, storing their tools and sweeping the floors. Amara arrived after school, her usual energy lighting up the room as she bounded in with her sketchbook tucked under her arm. She had started coming to the workshop regularly, drawn by the lively atmosphere and the chance to sit among the trainees while she worked on her art. "Hey, Mr. Robert," she called, plopping onto a stool near his workbench. "Guess what? I got an A on my art project." Robert turned to her, smiling broadly. "That's fantastic, Amara. What was the project about?" "We had to draw something that inspires us," she said, flipping open her sketchbook to show him her piece. It was a detailed drawing of the workshop, with trainees hard at work, and Robert standing in the middle, his hands guiding Marcus's. Above it, in bold letters, she had written, "Where hands build hope." Robert stared at the drawing, a lump forming in his throat. "Amara, this is incredible," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You captured everything so perfectly." She beamed at his praise. "Well, it's true, isn't it? This place isn't just about making stuff. It's about helping people believe in themselves." Her words struck a chord deep within Robert. He realized how much the workshop had come to mean to him, not just as a place to work, but as a sanctuary for growth and second chances. It wasn't just about teaching skills. It was about building people up, piece by piece, just like the projects they crafted. That evening, after the trainees had left and the workshop had quieted down, Vanessa stopped by. She leaned against the doorframe, watching as Robert meticulously cleaned and organized his tools. "You've really transformed this place," she said, her voice warm with admiration. Robert glanced up, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I didn't do it alone. The kids, they bring so much energy and determination. It's hard not to feel inspired." Vanessa stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the concrete floor. "Still, you've given them direction, a reason to believe they can do more than just survive." Robert set down the wrench he was holding and turned to her. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I didn't think I'd ever feel useful again. After everything that happened, I felt like I'd lost my place in the world. But this feels right." Vanessa smiled, her eyes meeting his with genuine kindness. "You've found your purpose, Robert, and you've given them something priceless: hope. Her words hung in the air, filling the room with a quiet sense of accomplishment. Robert felt a surge of gratitude, not just for Vanessa's belief in him, but for the chance to rebuild his life in a way that mattered. The following week, the workshop prepared for a special event, a community showcase. The trainees would display their finished projects, from furniture to home repairs, and share their stories with local families and organizations. Vanessa saw it as an opportunity to not only celebrate the trainees' hard work, but also attract potential donors and supporters for the Future Horizons initiative. Amara was ecstatic about the event, volunteering to create posters and decorations. She worked tirelessly in a corner of the workshop, her pencils and paints spread out around her as she brought her ideas to life. "I'm going to make this the most colorful showcase ever," she declared, holding up a banner that read, "Building Dreams, One Project at a Time." Robert chuckled, shaking his head fondly. "I don't doubt it, Amara. You've got the magic touch." The day of the showcase arrived, and the workshop was transformed into a vibrant display of creativity and craftsmanship. Finished furniture pieces stood proudly on platforms, their polished surfaces gleaming under the overhead lights. Large posters lined the walls, each one telling the story of a trainee and their journey to the program. Families, community leaders, and local business owners filled the space, mingling and admiring the work. Robert found himself in the center of it all, introducing trainees and answering questions about the program. He felt a mix of pride and humility as he watched the trainees beam with confidence, their hard work finally being recognized. Amara darted around the room, her sketchbook in hand, capturing the event with quick, expressive drawings. She stopped near Robert, tugging on his sleeve. "Look," she said, showing him a sketch of the workshop filled with people, laughter, and light. "It's perfect," Robert said, his smile wide and genuine. "Just like you." Near the end of the evening, Vanessa took the stage to address the crowd. She spoke passionately about the program's mission, the trainees' achievements, and the impact of community support. When she introduced Robert, inviting him to share a few words, he hesitated for a moment, overwhelmed by the attention. But as he looked out at the sea of faces, trainees, supporters, and friends, he felt a deep sense of purpose. He stepped up to the microphone, his voice steady and heartfelt. "This workshop isn't just about building furniture or fixing things," he began. "It's about building people. It's about giving folks like me, and like these incredible trainees, a chance to prove to ourselves and to the world that we're capable of greatness." The crowd erupted into applause, and Robert felt a wave of emotion wash over him. For the first time in years, he believed in himself and in the power of what they were creating together. As the event wound down and the last of the guests trickled out, Robert stood in the quiet workshop, the echoes of laughter and applause still lingering in the air. Amara and Vanessa joined him, their faces glowing with pride and contentment. "You've done something amazing here," Vanessa said softly. "I hope you know that." Robert nodded, his heart full. "I do, and I'm not done yet." As they left the workshop that night, the stars above seemed brighter than ever, their light reflecting the promise of new beginnings. For Robert, Vanessa, Amara, and the trainees, this was only the start of something extraordinary, a legacy of hope, resilience, and the unshakable belief that every person has the power to rebuild their life, one step at a time. A step toward redemption. The following morning, Robert arrived at the workshop earlier than usual. The community showcase had left him energized but introspective, the conversations and connections from the night before replaying in his mind. The event had been a resounding success. Donors pledged support, families expressed gratitude, and trainees basked in the recognition they had earned. Yet, amidst the celebration, Robert couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to be done. He stood in the quiet space, the tools neatly arranged on the walls, and the scent of sawdust lingering in the air. This workshop had become more than a workplace for him. It was a sanctuary, a place where broken pieces, of wood, of lives, could be mended and given purpose. As he moved to organize some leftover materials from the showcase, a knock on the workshop door startled him. He turned to see Vanessa standing there, her blazer impeccable as always, but her expression uncharacteristically hesitant. "Good morning," she greeted, stepping inside. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," Robert replied, setting down a plank of wood. "What brings you here so early?" Vanessa hesitated, then held out a folder she had been carrying. "I wanted to share this with you. It's a proposal I've been working on for expanding the vocational training program. After last night's turnout, I think we're in a strong position to take this to the next level." Robert took the folder, flipping through the pages filled with charts, outlines, and projections. It was thorough and ambitious, envisioning additional workshops, partnerships with local businesses, and an outreach initiative to bring more people into the program. His brows furrowed as he read, the enormity of the plan sinking in. "This is impressive," he said finally, closing the folder. "But it's a lot. Are we ready for something like this?" Vanessa smiled faintly, her confidence tempered with realism. "We won't know until we try. And I think with the right team, we can make it work." Robert caught the underlying message in her words. "You mean you want me to take on a bigger role?" Vanessa nodded. "You've proven yourself, Robert. The trainees respect you, the community sees your value, and your skills are exactly what we need to lead this expansion. I wouldn't ask if I didn't believe in you." Robert leaned against the workbench, the weight of her words settling over him. He had come so far since that chance encounter with Amara. But this felt like a new level of responsibility. It wasn't just about teaching or mentoring anymore. It was about leading, about shaping the future of a program that could change countless lives. "I'll need some time to think about it," he said honestly. Vanessa's expression softened. "Of course. Take all the time you need." That evening, Robert found himself at a nearby park, a place he often went to clear his mind. The air was cool, the trees rustling softly in the breeze. He sat on a weathered bench, the folder resting on his lap. He flipped through it again, studying the details and imagining what it would take to bring the vision to life. Memories of his past resurfaced, of the times he had failed, the people he had let down, the dreams he had abandoned. But then he thought of Amara, her fearless creativity, and the way she had seen him as a hero when he had barely seen himself as capable. He thought of the trainees, their determination to rise above their circumstances, and the pride they had shown at the showcase. He realized this wasn't just about him. It was about them, about giving others the chance he had been given, about creating something lasting and meaningful. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The next morning, Robert called Vanessa. His voice was steady, but there was a fire in his tone that hadn't been there before. "Let's do it," he said simply. "I'm in." Vanessa's relief was palpable through the phone. "You won't regret this, Robert. I know you'll make it something extraordinary." And with that, the wheels were set in motion. Over the next few weeks, Robert and Vanessa worked tirelessly to lay the groundwork for the program's expansion. They met with local businesses, pitched their vision to potential partners, and began scouting locations for additional workshops. Amara, ever the eager helper, created flyers and posters, her artwork infusing every piece of the campaign with vibrancy and hope. One day, as Robert was preparing for a meeting with a potential donor, Amara wandered into the workshop, her sketchbook clutched tightly in her hands. "Robert," she said, her voice uncharacteristically serious, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," he replied, setting down his notes. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated, then opened her sketchbook to a page filled with rough drawings of people and places. "Do you ever feel scared? Like, scared that you won't do a good job, or that people will think you're not good enough?" Robert studied her face, seeing the vulnerability behind her question. He knelt down to her level, his voice gentle but firm. "All the time, Amara. But you know what I've learned. Being scared doesn't mean you're not capable. It just means you care about what you're doing. And when you care, you'll find a way to make it work. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. So, you just keep going. That's right, Robert said, one step at a time. Amara smiled, and in that moment, Robert realized just how much she had taught him, about courage, about resilience, and about the importance of believing in yourself, even when it's hard. The expansion of the program wasn't without its challenges. There were setbacks, disagreements, and moments of doubt. But through it all, Robert remained steadfast, driven by the knowledge that every hurdle they overcame brought them closer to their goal. When the first of the new workshops opened, it was a moment of triumph. Trainees from all walks of life filled the space, their laughter and determination echoing off the walls. Robert stood at the front, his hands calloused but steady, his heart full of pride. This was more than a job, more than a second chance. It was a legacy, a testament to the power of connection, hope, and the belief that every person deserves a chance to build something extraordinary, no matter where they come from. And as he watched Amara sketching in the corner, her face glowing with inspiration, Robert knew that this was only the beginning. Together, they were building more than projects or programs. They were building a future forged together. Months turned into a year, and the Future Horizons Initiative's vocational program blossomed into something extraordinary. What had begun as a small workshop in a single community had grown into a network of training centers that spanned the city. The expansion brought together a mosaic of individuals, young and old, from different backgrounds, each seeking the chance to rebuild their lives. And at the heart of it all was Robert. The transformation in Robert's life was undeniable. The man who had once stumbled through an airport, weighed down by regret and uncertainty, now moved with purpose and conviction. Every morning, he arrived at the workshop early, greeting the trainees and the growing staff with a warm smile and a steady hand. He had found his place, not just as a teacher, but as a mentor, a leader, and a friend. One crisp autumn afternoon, Robert stood in the largest of the workshops, overseeing a group of trainees who were constructing a set of bookshelves for a local library. The scent of sawdust and freshly cut wood filled the air, and the rhythmic sounds of hammers and drills created a comforting symphony of progress. Nearby, Amara was perched on a stool, her sketchbook balanced on her knees. She had taken to documenting the program's milestones through her art, creating a visual chronicle of their journey. Her latest piece depicted a bustling workshop filled with vibrant faces and outstretched hands, each one contributing to a collective vision. "Amara," Robert called, glancing over at her. "What's the title of this masterpiece?" She grinned, holding up the sketch. "I'm calling it The Hands That Build Dreams. Do you like it?" Robert walked over, studying the drawing with admiration. "I don't just like it. I love it. You've captured everything this place stands for." Her smile widened, but her gaze grew thoughtful. "Do you think it's enough?" she asked softly. "Do you think we're really making a difference?" Robert knelt beside her, his expression serious but kind. "Amara, look around you. Every person in this room is here because they believe in something better. They've taken their first steps toward a new future, and that's because of what we've built together. You're a part of that." She nodded, her confidence bolstered by his words. "Thanks, Robert. I guess sometimes I just wonder if it's enough to change the world." Robert chuckled. "Changing the world starts with changing one life at a time. And trust me, you've already done that." The program's success caught the attention of city officials and larger organizations. One day, Vanessa called Robert into her office to share exciting news. Sitting across from her polished desk, he noticed a gleam of excitement in her eyes. "We've been invited to present our program at the State Community Development Summit," she announced, sliding a folder across the desk. "They want us to share our model, our story, and how we've achieved such a high success rate." Robert stared at the folder, his heart pounding. "They want me to speak." Vanessa nodded. "You're the heart of this program, Robert. No one else could tell our story the way you can. The thought of standing in front of an audience filled with influential leaders and stakeholders was both thrilling and terrifying. But Robert knew this was an opportunity not just for him, but for the program and the people it served. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady. "We've come too far to stop now." The weeks leading up to the summit were a whirlwind of preparation. Robert worked closely with Vanessa to craft his presentation, weaving in stories of the trainees, the partnerships they had built, and the impact of their work. Amara eagerly offered her artistic skills, creating slides and illustrations that brought the program's journey to life. On the day of the summit, Robert stood backstage, clutching his notes. The sound of applause and murmured conversations filtered through the curtain, and his nerves began to rise. He glanced down at the sketch Amara had given him that morning, a drawing of him standing at the front of a room, his arms open wide as he shared their story. "You've got this," she had said with unwavering confidence. "You're not just telling your story, you're telling ours." Her words echoed in his mind as he stepped onto the stage. The bright lights momentarily blinded him, but as he scanned the audience, he felt a wave of calm. These were the people who needed to hear what they had accomplished, who needed to see what hope and determination could achieve. Robert began his speech with the story of how it all started. A chance encounter with a young girl on a flight, the spark that reignited his belief in himself, and the journey that led to the creation of something far greater than he had ever imagined. He spoke of the trainees, their struggles, their triumphs, and the transformations that had taken place within the walls of their workshops. "The most important lesson I've learned," he said, his voice strong and resonant, "is that every person has the power to rebuild their life. All they need is someone to believe in them, to give them a chance to show the world what they're capable of." The audience was captivated, their expressions a mixture of admiration and inspiration. When Robert finished, the room erupted into applause, the sound filling him with a sense of accomplishment he hadn't known he was capable of. After the presentation, Robert was approached by a flood of attendees, community leaders, nonprofit directors, and even a few state officials, each one eager to learn more about the program and how they could replicate its success. Vanessa stood by his side, her pride evident in the way she introduced him as the driving force behind their achievements. Amara, who had been watching from the front row, rushed up to him with a grin that stretched from ear to ear. "You were amazing," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around him in a hug. "I told you you'd crush it." Robert laughed, the warmth of her enthusiasm washing over him. "Thanks, kiddo. I couldn't have done it without you." The summit marked a turning point for the Future Horizons initiative. With newfound support and recognition, the program expanded even further, reaching communities across the state and beyond. But for Robert, the greatest reward was the lives they continued to change. The young woman who became a skilled carpenter, the single father who used his training to start his own business, and the countless others who found hope and purpose within their walls. One evening, as Robert locked up the workshop for the night, he paused to look around. The room was quiet now, but it was filled with the echoes of laughter, determination, and growth. He thought of Amara, who was now thriving not just as an artist, but as a young leader in her own right. He thought of Vanessa, whose vision had paved the way for all of this. And he thought of the man he had once been, a man who had boarded a plane, lost and unsure, only to discover that his life was far from over. As he stepped into the cool night air, Robert felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This journey had been about more than building workshops or teaching skills. It had been about building people, building connections, and building a legacy that would endure. And in that moment, under a sky filled with stars, Robert knew one thing for certain. They were just getting started. Together, they were unstoppable. Together, they were changing the world. Unshakable foundations. The success of the summit didn't just validate the work Robert and the team had accomplished. It transformed the scope of their mission. Within weeks, inquiries began pouring in from organizations across the state, eager to learn how they could replicate the model in their communities. Future Horizons Initiative was no longer just a local program. It was becoming a movement. The expansion brought challenges. Managing a network of workshops required more staff, more funding, and more time than anyone had anticipated. Yet, instead of feeling overwhelmed, Robert felt invigorated. He had found a purpose that gave meaning to every late night, every tough decision, and every hard-won success. One evening, after a particularly long day, Robert sat in the workshop's quiet break room, sipping a cup of coffee that had gone cold. The room was dimly lit, and the faint hum of the building's heater filled the silence. He leaned back in his chair, letting the weight of the day settle over him. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, her coat draped over her arm. "Still here?" she asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Couldn't leave just yet," Robert admitted with a tired smile. "Too much to think about." Vanessa set her things down and joined him at the table. "You've done something incredible, you know. The summit, the expansion, none of this would have happened without you." Robert shook his head modestly. "It wasn't just me. It's the team, the trainees, the community. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." Vanessa leaned forward, her gaze steady. "No, Robert, you made it the right place and the right time. Don't downplay what you've accomplished." Her words hung in the air, and Robert felt a flicker of pride. He had spent so much of his life doubting his own worth, but now, sitting across from someone who believed in him so deeply, he realized how far he had come. The trainees, too, had begun to shine in ways that surpassed even Robert's expectations. Marcus, the teenager who had once struggled to sand a cabinet, was now teaching others how to build complex furniture. A young woman named Sophia, who had joined the program after escaping an abusive relationship, had become a skilled welder and was pursuing her dream of starting her own business. Each success story felt like a triumph not just for the individual but for the entire program. One day, Amara approached Robert with a proposal of her own. She had been working on a project in secret, pouring her heart into a new artistic endeavor. "I want to make a mural," she announced, holding up a rough sketch. "Something big, something that shows what this place means to all of us." The sketch depicted a vibrant scene. Trainees working together, their hands creating something beautiful and strong. In the center stood a towering tree, its branches reaching toward the sky, its roots spreading deep into the earth. Around the tree were the words, "From struggle, we grow." Robert stared at the sketch, his throat tightening. "Amara, this is incredible. Where do you want to put it?" She pointed to the blank wall outside the main workshop. "Right there, so everyone can see it when they walk in." Robert grinned. "Let's make it happen." The mural became a community project. Trainees, staff, and volunteers all pitched in, painting under Amara's direction. The process was messy and chaotic at times, but the result was breathtaking. When the mural was finally unveiled, it was met with awe and applause. The tree stood tall and proud, its vibrant colors a testament to the resilience and strength of everyone who had walked through those doors. For Robert, the mural became a symbol of everything they had built together. It wasn't just a piece of art. It was a reminder that even in the face of adversity, growth was possible. But life wasn't without its challenges. As the program expanded, so did the scrutiny. There were criticisms from skeptics who doubted the sustainability of their model, and moments when funding fell short or plans went awry. Robert faced each obstacle head-on, his determination unwavering. One particularly difficult day, as Robert was working late, he received an unexpected visitor. Amara appeared in the doorway, her sketchbook in hand and a determined look on her face. "I thought you could use some company," she said, pulling up a chair beside him. Robert chuckled, setting aside the stack of papers he had been reviewing. "You're too good to me, kid." Amara opened her sketchbook and began to draw, her pencil moving swiftly across the page. After a while, she slid the drawing over to Robert. It was a simple yet powerful image, a hand holding a hammer, surrounded by rays of light. Below it, she had written, Keep building." Robert stared at the drawing, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Thanks, Amara. I needed this." "You're welcome," she said with a smile. "You've got this, Robert. We all believe in you." As the seasons changed and the program continued to grow, Robert began to see the impact of their work ripple outward. Trainees who had once struggled to find their footing were now thriving, their confidence and skills transforming not only their own lives but the lives of those around them. Families were being rebuilt, communities strengthened, and hope restored. One day, as Robert walked through the workshop, he paused to admire the mural. The tree, with its vibrant branches and deep roots, seemed to glow in the afternoon light. Amara stood beside him, her face glowing with pride. "Do you think it'll last?" she asked softly. Robert smiled, his gaze fixed on the mural. "It will, because it's not just paint on a wall. It's a reflection of what we've built here. And that's something no one can take away." Amara nodded, her eyes shining. "From struggle, we grow." "Exactly," Robert said, resting a hand on her shoulder. "And we're just getting started."